Shalom, Bmore. We are the Isupk, coming out of 1 West Harlem, New York, 125th Street. 125th Street. We are not affiliated with any other of the Hebrew groups out here. This is the Lashawan Qadash Hebrew class. And we are going to continue on our journey of learning the holy tongue, the tongue that is set apart, the tongue that pretty much is the tongue that Yahweh spoke. And this is the tongue that he spoke to his disciples. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, actually pointed this out. So the goal for this class is to go slow, learning the Hebrew. We're not going to take this fast. We're going to understand why the Hebrew is important, understand why you should speak the Hebrew, understand why, and understand why, why we should learn today. So we're going to do a little bit of review from last week. Is everything clear, sir? Yeah. Okay. So you don't mind? I'm gonna go through some scriptures. You don't mind reading something? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to just review last week. Well, first of all, let's review last week. Last week we went over why should we speak the Hebrew language? What's the point? I've heard people out there say there's no point now. The Most High could speak to you in the language that you speak, which is true. However, the Most High has made it clear of what language that he is going to restore. We're going to look at that. We're going to review that. And we're going to see the language that the Messiah, who died for Israel, what he spoke. Because we're supposed to do everything in his name. And when we talked about last week, name in the Hebrew meant your reputation. So we're supposed to mimic everything that Yahweh, the Savior of Israel, spoke. So also, what language, the language that you're speaking now is more likely the language of your oppressor. This will show you who is actually, who's dominated your people, the language that you spoke. We're speaking English, so you know that the English came over here and used imperialism, capitalism, and all those other things to dominate our people. And that's the customs that we took on. We took the customs of our slave master. If you're speaking Spanish, more than likely, you had the Spaniards come over here and they took over the lands like they did in Mexico, and they did some of the Caribbean islands. If you're speaking French, more than likely you had the French come over here and dominate like they did in places like Haiti, or they took over places like even in Louisiana. You see a lot of French influence. So more than likely, the language that you are speaking, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to the Black, Hispanics, and Natives, you are speaking the language of your oppressor. And you know, back in Deuteronomy 28, it speaks about pretty much that your enemies would come, an enemy whose language you did not understand, would come and take you to a land far away. And pretty much that is what happened in the history of, especially the black man. He was taken and he was brought over here on slave ships. And this was not the language that our forefathers spoke. They did not speak English. So one of the ways that we know that we're under the oppressor's thumb is because we speak his language. I go back to last week, Alexander the Great, when he started taking over the lands that he conquered, he changed everything over into the Greek language. Even the scriptures, that's where you get the Septuagint from, was changed over into the Greek. So with that being said, we should get back to the language that the Most High spoke. Well, today we're going to do a quick review and say, well, what language was that and why is it necessary? So last week we said, why should you speak a language? Why is language important? Number one, let's just review. Language unites people. It causes, it unites people together. You go somewhere and you hear, let's say you go into a Spanish-speaking country and you hear somebody speak English, it will just get your attention. You're like, oh, okay, somebody speaks English. So language kind of brings people together. You saw this in Genesis 11 when the whole earth was one. They were on one language, one accord. They spoke the same thing. What happened was the Most High came down and divided them by their language. So that's another thing. What does language do? Language builds barriers. It causes when you're in a shop, maybe you're in a Korean shop getting your nails done, maybe you're at the 7-Eleven, and the people will speak to you in your language. However, when they start speaking to each other, they speak in their language. Well, why are they doing that in front of you? Because they're showing that there is a barrier. They're saying that this is a line together. We need to start going back to the language that our forefathers spoke, and that is the Hebrew tongue. And this will separate us. Now remember, this Hebrew language is not the Yiddish language. The Yiddish is what the modern Jewish man speaks, and that is pretty much a bastard language. It's mixed with Russian, probably even got some German in there, but it's a bastard language. It's not the pure language. Also, if you look at Zephaniah, I believe it's 3 and 9, the Most High said that I will return and restore a pure language. Well, if he's going to restore a pure language, we need to find out what language he's talking about. And the best way to find out the language he's talking about is to find out the language that he spoke. So today we are going to just review once more why we should speak the Lashawan Qadash. Lashawan means the tongue or language. Qadash means separate or holy. And the Most High, all through the book of the scriptures, was always telling Israel to be a separate people. Separate yourselves, to be a holy people. That means you're to be a type of people not like everybody else. So if you're not like everybody else, then you're going to have a separate tongue, because it's not going to be common. Because, our Creator, the Most High, he is not a common God, and he doesn't want to be looked as a common God. You have to approach him like he's set apart, and he wants us to be set apart as well. So with that being said, let's start going into the scriptures so that we can get a better grasp. Some of these scriptures are reviewed from last week, but like I said, we're going to take baby steps in learning this holy tongue. It's new to all of us, and we have to thank Most High Christ that General Yohana is now raising up men and women of the Lord to learn and get back to this holy tongue. And so he is allowing us to learn this tongue. He's allowing us to speak this language, because we're going to go over, like we did last week, how to greet a brother or sister in the school. And so we're taking baby steps to learn this. But once you learn this, then you start teaching your children this. And like I said last week, when you're a child between the ages of 0 and 5, you actually learn a language differently than when you learn it as an adult. So that your children will actually be speaking this fluently by the time that they're 8, 9, 10 years old, that they're hearing this often. Yes, we have to go through the grind and struggle now. However, generation 2 down the line, if we keep moving in this direction, our children and their children will be speaking this Hebrew language fluently. But however, we are just getting back to us, because some of us are just coming out of the world and trying to shut ourselves to the world. So, and because of that, we're going to just take baby steps and take one day at a time to try to get back to this holy tongue. I wanted to start out with Acts 26 and 14. Let's go to Acts 26 and 14. We're going to look at this scripture, and we're going to see why should we speak the holy tongue. This is just a little quick review from people last week that maybe are just tuning in, but we're just going to get a little quick review of why can't we just talk to each other in the English language? Well, I said this too. When you speak a language, it also brings about a culture, and we have a culture in this English language that we need to start to come out of. So, when you speak the language of a group or a ethnic group or a group of people, you also take on their customs. And so one of the things is, since we want to come out of this system, come out of this Babylonian system that we're in, we need to start taking on the culture that the Most High gave us when he gave to our forefathers and when he made that covenant with us. So that's one of the reasons. But let's see, we got that, bro. Let's look at Acts 26. Some Bibles back there too. Okay. So Acts 26:14. Let's see what it says.
Acts 26:14. And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me.
So to give you some backstory, this is the Apostle Paul. You know that he was on the road to Damascus. So this is him telling the story of how his first encounter with Yahweh Shah. So he's on the road. He hears a voice. Okay, so somebody is speaking to him. So let's see what he says.
And saying in a Hebrew tongue, Saul, why persecute thou me?
Okay, so Saul heard a voice. Okay, he heard a voice, somebody speaking to him in the Hebrew tongue. So that is the language that, the Messiah of Israel, that's the language he spoke now. We should all know that Paul at least could speak 2 languages, at least. Some people even think he spoke more than that. But he spoke to Saul in the Hebrew tongue, okay? And he heard this voice coming from heaven. Some people talk, well, I want to speak the heavenly language. Well, the language coming out of the heaven itself, was the Hebrew tongue. So that should kind of give you a clue of what the pure language is in Zephaniah 3:9. I mean, because if it's coming, we know that, Yahweh Shah was without sin, and he has a pure tongue. He has pure lips. So he is speaking to Saul in the Hebrew tongue. So that's important right there. All right. So now we know in Galatians that Saul said that he learned everything from Yahweh Shah. Okay. So he learned from Yahweh Shah. That means he mimicked Yahweh Shah. So everything that Yahweh Shah taught him, he did. Well, let's look at that. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 11:1. So we know we're supposed to do everything in Yahweh Shah's name, and we know that the apostles and disciples were trained by Yahweh Shah. And so since Paul or Saul, since he was trained by Yahweh Shah, let's see what he says. Let's we got that.
Okay. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ.
Okay, so Saul is telling us, follow him as he follows Yahweh Shah. Okay, so he's going to imitate Yahweh Shah. And Yahweh Shah spoke to him in the Hebrew tongue. So if he's speaking to him in the Hebrew tongue, he probably taught him in the Hebrew tongue, and he wants us to imitate him. Now, there's another reason too, because we see that when Saul was teaching, especially getting the attention of the people of the Hebrew background, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, because language also gets our attention. Let's look at that. Let's look at Acts 22 and verse 2. Actually, we start with verse 1. Okay, so language brings unity. Language builds a barrier. Language brings about a culture. Okay, Yahweh Shah spoke in the Hebrew language, so language is important because we learn, from the people we look up to the language. You learned the language more than likely from your mother, your father, or whoever was raising you. You learn that language. So it's important to teach, individuals a language, because it brings about all of these things. You got that? Okay. Acts 22 and verse 1. Let's see what it says.
Acts 22 and 1. Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense which I make now unto thee. 2. And when they heard that he spoke in Hebrew, that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence.
Okay, so when he started speaking to them in the Hebrew tongue, it got their attention. Okay, so they became even more silent. Okay, and I'm not, like I said, you got to meet people where they're at. I mean, I wouldn't go and start speaking Hebrew to people that don't understand. I would speak to them in the language they do, because we find that example in Acts 2, where people, heard the language of their birth, and they got their attention. They're like, oh, wow, But the point is that we want to get back to that Hebrew tongue so we can come out of our slave language. We want to come out of the language that our master was putting on us and made us speak. because it will make us forget the holy tongue. It will make us forget the language of our forefathers. And we're trying to come out of this system. And one way to come out of this system is to get to go into start speaking of the language that the Most High spoke, that Yahushua spoke. So why did Yahushua speak Hebrew, though? Let's go there. We didn't really talk about that last week. But now we're going to talk about today, why did Yahushua speak Hebrew? Because, well, what made him speak Hebrew? I mean, because we see that he spoke to Paul the Hebrew tongue, but what made him speak Hebrew is going to be one of the another reasons why we should speak Hebrew. Let's look at John 5:19 and see. We're just going to go over a few scriptures today just to cement the fact of why this holy tongue is very important to us as Hebrews to learn. Because there are some groups out there that say, well, you don't have to. It's a dead language. Just stick to. But I'm going to tell you, even reading the scriptures in the Hebrew tongue has opened my eyes up to pretty much a whole different light on the scriptures. When you read the scriptures in Hebrew, you'll get sometimes even a whole different meaning when you're reading it in English. So that's why it's important to read it, because all people that understand language and translation, when you translate something over from a different language, things are lost. It's just what they'll try to do. I mean, and anybody that speaks a different language will tell you. They'll tell you that when you are translating something over, sometimes things are lost. What people that translate, the best thing they'll do is they'll try to match the best match in the other language to match whatever language they're translating it from. Okay, so if I'm translating something from English to Spanish, I'll try. Sometimes if I say it literally, the other language might not understand that. So because if I said in English it's raining cats and dogs, well, in the English language we understand that's an idiom, we understand it's a metaphor, we understand that's allegorical language. I translate that over to Spanish, they would be looking at me like, huh? Unless they understood the English idiom or metaphor, or even in Spanish in the language that's already idiom or metaphor. But if it's not, they're going to look and be like, what are you talking about? So sometimes when you translate stuff literally, the translation doesn't go over too well. So sometimes when people are translating stuff, especially the scriptures, they'll try to find the best match in the English or in whatever language they're translating for to fit it. And things are lost. So that's why it's another good reason. We know the scriptures was written in the Hebrew tongue. So it's important for you to learn the Hebrew language and start understanding the Hebrew culture so that you can get back to understanding at least as close as possible what their original intent was. Because we got people nowadays reading the Bible and really thinking that Eve was talking to a snake. And that is very sad. I was one of them. Okay, I grew up a Christian, and that, like I said last week, that's the closest thing you can to death. It will kill you. Christianity will kill you. I say that all the time, and I will say that it will kill you. We were looking at the scriptures, and I'm thinking Eve was talking to a snake. I think Adam's rib was taken. Well, if you understand our culture, just black people, period, we speak in a lot of slang. We speak in a lot of, we speak Ebonics, we speak slang. That's the way we talk to each other. Well, that's the way the scripture was written. It was just written in the Hebrew tongue. They spoke in metaphor. They spoke in allegorical language, idioms, similes. So you should, so if you're just translating stuff over to English and you're looking at those scriptures and taking them literally, you're going to be in trouble. You're not even going to understand the intent behind those scriptures. So, so let's just be clear there. It's important to understand when something's written in a language. It's important to get back to the language so you understand the full meaning of it. Not let people out here fool you and say, "Oh, it doesn't matter," because it does. All right, let's look at John 5:19, and let's see what these are the words of Yahushua. Make sure you're following along. If you're at home, those people at home, please follow along. Maybe get your notebook that talks about Hebrew class, because we're going to go over some of those things today. John 5:19, you have that, brother?
Okay. John 5:19. The Son can do nothing of himself, but with he see if the Father do.
Okay. So Yahweh Shah is telling the people right here that he is doing nothing of himself. He is mimicking his Father. Okay, and if he's mimicking his Father and he's speaking, we know they were speaking the Hebrew tongue, which they would call Aramaic, but it was really the Hebrew tongue. Okay, he's speaking the Hebrew tongue. Okay, and he spoke to Saul in the Hebrew tongue. Well, why is he speaking that? He's mimicking what was taught to him by the Most High. Plain and simple. He's doing nothing himself. So when he even spoke to Saul, when he spoke to him, because remember, the Father is the one, the Most High is the one that chooses. Okay, the Most High is the one that calls you out and called you into this truth. You know, the Most High does that. So when the Most High was calling Saul, he sent Yahweh Shah to speak to him. And what is Yahweh Shah doing? He's mimicking what his Father said, or what the Most High said to him. He's mimicking that. He's doing nothing of himself. So when he spoke in that Hebrew tongue, he was speaking the same language that the Most High was speaking. He's mimicking the Most High. So he's saying, hey, I'm not doing anything of himself. So, you know, this actually is a good thing against a lot of the preachers out there that say, you know, well, you don't have to, pretty much you don't have to keep the law anymore, or you could do your own thing. If Yahweh Shah himself said he could do nothing himself, where does that leave everybody else standing? You know, Yahweh Shah himself said he couldn't do nothing himself. And he's king of all of us. Right. But he's under the Most High. And if he stood up there saying, I can do nothing of myself, then nobody can sit up here and say, well, I can do my own thing of myself, especially these churches.
That's right.
You know, so let's look at another scripture. So we see Yahweh Shah is mimicking Yahweh. Okay, let's look at John 8:26 to get you some more background on this information. Let's look at John 8:26, and we're going to look at some more on this. Of why this is important, why because I just want us to be clear why we should get back to this language. John 8:26.
John 8:26. I have many things to say to judge of you, but he that sent me is
okay. He's speaking to us those things with Let's go to let's look at let's move down just a couple scriptures. John 8:28. Like just two scriptures down from that.
8:28. Then said Jesus to them, when ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father have taught me, I speak these things.
Okay, so what he's speaking, he's heard the Father, the Most High, said, your child, which if you have children,